So thank you for coming. We have a special speaker today. Anybody been to Easton to do anything at all? Okay, great. So Steiner Associates has developed Easton from the ground up. And this is what they do. This is what they do all over the country. So what they really try to do is have a welcoming, sustainable, pedestrian-friendly town center destination. And the projects are designed and sustained by employing the same fundamental principles of town planning that have created and maintained vibrant urban city centers for more than a century. So they encourage interaction, exploration. They create energy and vitality of urban centers. I also wanted you to know, Mike mentioned service this morning, and I wanted to let you know that Yaromir Steiner has also held many positions. He served as a past board member of the Richard M. Ross Hospital, past trustee of the International Council of Shopping Centers, board of trustees member of New Albany Community Foundation, Arthur James Cancer Hospital, Richard Solove Research Institute Foundation. He's also served as president of the French American Chamber of Commerce in Houston, and has been past president of the Simon Kenton Council for the Boy Scouts Council in Central Ohio. So I would like to thank you for coming and have you help me welcome Mr. Steiner.
I will tell you to move the slides. Okay. Good morning. First, a few things. It's Thursday night. After tomorrow, there's going to be the first opening party at the Cowboy Place. So, and then after that, and then I'll tell you a story. When I came to the United States from France, I arrived to Houston. I barely spoke English. And that's why I have Canadian assistants, who did the translation for me. And that was, you remember, 1980s was the cowboy time. The nightclubs, the gillies, the urban cowboy and all that stuff. So, arrived to Texas, I was 28 years old, and, I said, I'm going to be like them. So I get my cowboy hat and my belts and my jeans and my boots and everything else. And I learned to dance. I could do two-step, Cotton Eye Joe. I mean, I can do all those things. Like my wife would say, you would be okay until you speak. Then they know you are not. So, but it has been a long time, since I danced, and I was thinking, is this club opening at Easton? They're going to ask me to go. They're going to ask me to ride the bull, which is at my age, I have to be careful. But dancing, I could, but I want to let you all know that if you go on Thursdays, any Thursday in the future, between 8 and 10, there are free dancing lessons. So you can go and I mean, two steps are very simple, fast, slow. So that's one thing. The second thing I would like to mention is about the jeans. Yesterday, we have our weekly leadership meeting, and someone mentions from our admin group that, they issued a new memo modifying our company policy about our dress code. First, I had forgotten we had a dress code, but I guess there was one, and they authorized jeans. Yesterday, that happened. So I don't know what the coincidence here, and then one of the reasons was because I came to work in jeans, so they felt that, maybe time have changed since COVID and we should change the rules. And one thing I would like to mention, if you go to the Cowboy Place for your meetings and you wear jeans, remember when I came, we used to iron the jeans and even, make them stiff, so the crease was perfect. So I invite the men who are going to join in jeans to ask your wives to, or you do it yourself. Okay, so, there are so many things we can speak about. I picked to talk to you about malls. I mean, not about Easton. I mean, Easton, and I mean, I could have explained to you how it was done and so forth, but I'm going to talk to you about malls. And because I need to move kind of a little bit so I can see what I'm showing here. So let me see. I'm trying to figure out which button is this one. Okay, well, I want to talk to you about malls. I mean, obviously, all of us know. So is there a future for B&M is brick and mortar retail? Is there a future for brick and mortar retail? Or is the internet, the Amazon, I mean, everything we know as the end of malls and malls of retail. So you look at malls, and malls are dying. And some of them are just ones in Ohio, but everywhere malls are dying. You see it in Columbus with Tuttle Crossing now. And so next slide. But at the same time, there are places, shopping center. It's working now. Okay. So their malls might be dying, but it is not then what we call the organized physical transactional gathering places. Look at Easton, for example, and I can give you more examples around the nation. Many projects I have not done. Or you can look at Santa Monica Promenade in California, which is in worse shape right now. But I mean, that was an old photograph. I mean, they are surviving. So what's happening? Well, I want to tell you kind of what happens. On the top left, you see our old downtown. Then from the downtowns, we went to the malls. You see on the bottom left, the big parking lot, department stores, and so forth. Then the lifestyle centers start emerging. The picture over there is the Grove in Los Angeles. Then mixed-use town centers with offices and apartments start appearing. And then we are back now to mixed-use urban environments. We are kind of imitating downtowns, and downtowns are coming back as well. So what's happening? What happened? So why the malls? First, I want to explain to you why we had malls. And malls were an accident of history. It is not an urban model that was supposed to last. But it was the consequence of things that happened between 1920 and 1950s, which then created the malls. So, those changes resulted in the destruction of our downtowns. Compared to what they were. So the things I'm going to talk about are, 4 things that impacted this was Euclidean zoning, FHA's post-war, role, Eisenhower highway system, and then the Great American Streetcar scandal. Not many people realize that. So Euclid, obviously, I'm not talking about the Greek mathematicians. This is the city in Ohio, around Cleveland. And basically in the 1920s, they passed the first zoning ordinance in America, where basically they said, we as the city can determine, you can build houses here, factories here, shopping centers here, and we're going to tell you what that is. 1920s, it was for the good of the community. Ambler Realty, one of my colleagues, I guess, went to court and said, this is taking under the 5th Amendment. You cannot restrict our property use without compensating us for it. Went to the Supreme Court and they lost. Remember, 1910s, 20s, 30s, is the socialist period, right? There was an American Communist Party. Russia was blooming. Everybody was talking about collectivism and so forth. Frankly, with the Supreme Court today, I'm not sure that would have passed. But at that time, collective good was more important than individual rights or the 5th Amendment. So that passed. So after war, so what happened is when this passed 1920s, we had an economic recession in America in the late 20s, then 30s were difficult times. Then we went to war. For 20 years, nobody was worrying about building anything. It was kind of difficult times in America. But after the war, with the soldiers coming back, there was the explosion. So we have 20 years of pent-up demand. We are building nothing. And suddenly we are coming, we need houses, we need offices, we need factories, we need everything. So nobody was going to go and hire Pierre L'Enfant or Olmsted. Pierre L'Enfant, the planner of Washington, D.C., Olmsted, Boston, etc. And it was much simpler. Municipal, create a zoning map, and then cities plan and move ahead. So, you can see, what happened. That's, Levittown, Long Island, and so forth. And, we copied that everywhere. The second thing was the Federal Housing Administration. So Federal Housing Administration, after the war, to encourage building, maybe some of you know, but maybe all of you know, but after the war, the FHA was created, and for a veteran to borrow money to buy a house was very, very simple. You could have to put less than 1% down payment, and basically all the money would be loaned to you to buy a house. But at the same time, if you are living in Columbus in the Italian village, you have an old home, and you say you want to redo the kitchen and you want to borrow $2,000, you cannot borrow. So what is happening is that much easier to go to the suburbs in the subdivision and build houses rather than remodeling your kitchen or your subdivision. Then interstate highway system. Again, our highway system is like the internet, invented by the military. So, it was created basically, Eisenhower, when he was young, on the left side, he was a young lieutenant. He crossed the country in 1919. It took him 3 months for a military convoy to go to one end to the other. Then he was supreme commander in the Second World War. And then what does he see? The Panzer divisions on the Autobahns, going one side of Germany to the other. He said, oh my God, in America, if the Russians invade California or the Chinese invade California, by the time we get from here to there, we have a problem. That is the origin of the highway system. It was not, don't think it was for going right or left. It was for military purposes. So, but what happened, and that was passed in 58, and then it was the boom of freeway. But then what happened is we always take advantage of things. If you want the freeway system, we're supposed to arrive to cities and go around them, not go to the middle. What is in red was not the initial intention. But then, free federal money and the local governments and lobbying and this and that and so forth. So the freeway came all the way downtown. What is the consequence now? So you can live in the homes in the suburbs and work downtown and go back to your home. There was not a problem for going in and out. You are not driving on Broad Street or Main Street. You could take the freeway to go down. The third thing is, this is the least known. In the 1930s, all these companies you see listed there, General Motors, Firestone, Standard Oil, Phillips Petroleum, etc., created a consortium, and they decided to buy the transit companies. In Columbus, we had transit, we had trams and so forth. Anyway, so they started buying those companies because they calculated that buying those companies and letting them slowly die was more profitable in the sales of gas, tires, and cars, replacing the people driving the vehicles. So they did that in the 46. They bought 46 systems, 45 cities, all the states, etc. And slowly, as you know, they essentially all disappeared. There was a lawsuit because it was, a monopoly kind of thing. And then I can see at the bottom, GM was fined $5,000 and the treasurer $1. And then, but what he did was not right. But it was done. Nobody was going to be transit back. So all those things created basically the ideal environment for the creation of retail, because now we are all living in the suburbs, and we have zoning. And what do? We don't have zoning. You see, a Main Street zoning doesn't exist in zoning, because in Main Streets, you have, say, retail on the ground floor, then you can have apartments on top, or you have offices around it. In zoning, you cannot do that. Either it's one thing or another. Now, things are changing now, but it didn't used to be that way. The zoning was very clear. It was one thing or another. So retailer came, and I can make you, like a half an hour speech just about the first malls, but it's too complicated. Minnesota, Dayton, and around Detroit. But so what happened is over, 1950s, they started, and by the 1980s, we had almost 1,500 malls around the United States. But remember what I said at the beginning, that's an accident of history. Those four things I described, the zoning, and then the FHA loaning system, the Eisenhower highway system. These are all man-made things who created the consequences of the malls. But then things start changing. So the things that changed that in the 1980s, and the three things I will mention to you, there are many other things, but simply the number one was the creation of a CNU. Those who are not architects or in the industry will not know, but CNU was an organization of young architects who got together and say, we need to plan, and that was the creation of CNU. The second one was obviously the internet, the impact of the internet. And the third thing is the fiscal policy of our nation. So I will explain how then those things then reversed the momentum of the malls toward their elimination. So what happened is this CNU, Congress for New Urbanism, created in 96. For them, they are saying zoning by separating uses kills placemaking. You cannot really have placemaking. In America, before the war, we are 200 million people. And then by the time we get to 1980s, we are 300 million people, and we have half the downtowns. I mean, the gathering places, the urban fabrics, they were all destroyed. And these people believed that zoning was the culprit and that we should be focusing more on placemaking, place creation than doing things. And then under their influence, maybe you know that project, if you travel in that neck of the woods, Seaside in Florida, in the Panhandle, is one of the very first projects under CNU that was created at the time. I mean, again, for architects, it's meaningful, but Mashpee Commons, a friend of mine in Massachusetts, that was one of the first projects he did. And then people like Easton, I mean, we are inspired by that as well. How to create a sense of place, with urban fabrics and the fountains and public amenities and so forth. So they reversed that trend. Then the other thing is obviously e-commerce. E-commerce should not be exaggerated, but clearly had an impact, on the sales. But there also, I want to correct some of your impression. When you read national statistics from the federal databases, you have to understand that when they talk online sales, they group three things. They group online sales like we knew them in the past. You remember when you used to buy Sears catalogs or order your medicine by mail, etc. It counts in that category. It counts in that category Amazon, Wayfair, that is pure players, that is who are basically a marketplace for other people's goods. And then the third one is the brick and mortar retailers. Today, Target, who has stores, sells online. Walmart sells online. Gap sells online. So it's really a third. I mean, the pure players who have nothing to do, with brick and mortar. I mean, if you want the first third always existed, the online buying from Sears and catalogs and so forth. The second third, the bottom third, brick and mortar retailers, they are brick and mortar, so they don't hurt themselves. In fact, it helps them. It's only the middle part that has that impact. But so when you say, for example, retail sell 20% of total sales, about a third is coming from pure players like Amazon, Wayfair, but still had an impact on what's happening on retail. And then that's the most important thing I want to focus on. Not many people understand that. This data is in a French author's book. His name is Thomas Piketty. He's an economist. He wrote a book about capital in the 21st century. It's a play on words, like Karl Marx wrote Das Kapital, so he's playing on it. He wrote that book. He's an economist, and the book is available. I don't recommend you buy it because a third of it is footnotes. It's like a PhD guy, but there is a 20-page summary you can buy online, and it's easier to read. But that statistic is from there, and he picked that from the IRS. So this is on the left side. Basically, this is how much of the income on the tax returns, American IRS tax returns, how much income is declared by whom? So the top 10% of Americans, 10% of the tax returns, 10% of the return, declared about 35% of the income. That was after the war. And the bottom 90% of the tax returns declared the remaining 70%. So 30%, 70%, but top 10% versus 90. So the top 10% declare much more income than the rest. That number was pretty much fixed until 1980. 1980 is the Reagan, the supply side economics revolution, that is basically the economy will grow by the rich people spending their money downward. So what happened is in this 35 years between the war and 1980, the 35% remained flat. But starting 1980 to 2015, today the top 10% of the tax return declared 50% of the income. And the bottom 90% of Americans declared the other 50%. If there was a Communist Party of America, they should be advertising this sort of stuff, because there's clearly an income distribution imbalance that people intuitively sense. They say, we don't make as much money and so forth. The money goes to the top. But this is about retail, not about politics. So what's the consequences? The problem is when the 10% of the Americans, of which probably most of us are part, we get double, triple the money. We are not buying 5 times more shirts. That discretionary income is available, but it gets accumulated, and that's why you see the hedge funds, the investment in risk investments, because when you have too much money, then you don't mind taking riskier bets and doing other things. But retail sales are not going up, and what's happening is the 90% of the Americans who now have only 50% of the income to share, basically they don't have as much money, and to spend, but they have the same needs, so they have to be more careful how they spend money and how they do their expenditures. So what happened is, I'm getting to the malls. All of you are old to remember, between here and here, what happened? Gap created Old Navy. We invented the warehouse clubs, Costco's and others. We invented the power centers. There were no power centers. You went to Ace Hardware before. So now we have Home Depots and so forth. And then you have, the outlet centers in Jeffersonville and so forth. So what happened is, because the bottom Americans who live, I don't want to exaggerate, but paycheck to paycheck, they spend most of their money. They were the big expenditures. After the war, for example, the malls were perfect. Because what were the aspirations of our parents? Our parents made up high heel shoes to go to the malls to shop. Buying things was aspirational at that time, because it was coming after the war. But then when you still needed things, well, instead of buying $50 jean at Gap, you bought it at $35 at Old Navy. Now you go to Costco, buy them for $20. Because the expenditure are needed. So what happens is, I'm telling you all this because the malls basically, so what happens is the malls are an environment of selling discretionary income. If you want, so I'm going to give you, I want to make sure not take too much of your time here, but so there are two kinds of expenditures in every household. There's what we call need-based shopping and want-based shopping. Big distinction. Need-based shopping, every household has need-based shopping. They need to buy eggs, milk, underwear, whatever. Discretionary shopping is what you do with your discretionary income, what you have on the money you don't have. In our company, we call the need-based shopping replacement or replenishment shopping, whereas the want-based shopping is discretionary expenditures. You do it with the extra money you have. So you can understand that a $60,000, $80,000 household might have a few $1,000s a year in discretionary spending, would be going to the movies, once a month, whereas a $500,000 household has hundreds of $1,000s to spend. And then the decision making is different. In a need-based shopping, decisions are made based on its rational decision. How many eggs can I get? How many meals can I get, etc. And then in the want-based shopping is an emotional. It's a aspirational decision making. That's again, people make fun of me when I say that because they say it's a sexist comment. But you can get a free bag at Kroger, and everything you put on that bag, you can also carry it in a $3,000 Louis Vuitton bag. So why spend $3,000? Can get a free bag at Kroger. But it's an aspirational expenditure. And then people make fun of me because why did I pick a woman object instead of talking something about men tend to do? I don't know, but it just isn't said. But you understand what I'm saying. So what happens? So the malls were more the discretionary spending environment. Easton sells almost $1 billion of things we don't need. They are basically unnecessary. But if you go to Kroger, etc., these are things you need. So what happens is in America, discretionary spending, available money starts shrinking. So malls lost their customers. Columbus had 3 malls. I was not here then, when we had 1 million people, Westland, Eastland, Northland. And then here we are almost approaching 2.5 million people. We are down to 2 malls, Polaris and Easton. Why? Well, because there's no income, available to feed those machines. So, I'm sorry, I don't want to be too negative. But, so what happens is, we start the, malls, we are down to about 809 in America that are viable. And my guess, this is my projection, I think by 2030, we'll be down about 250, what we call malls, in America. Okay, I'm not going to bore. Maybe, do you want to talk about how we merchandise restaurant? I can answer questions, or I can talk about more.
You guys
Okay.
want questions or more? Okay.
Okay, I'm good. It's one of my young men picked this. I'm not sure that was the right thing, but anyway.
So Yaromir, we're going to have him speak, but we may not be able to take a lot of questions. Is that a good compromise?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, maybe I'll go as quick as I can here. Now I'm not giving you current information. We on purpose, we stopped that time 5-6 years ago. So here's what we do. When we merchandise, we organize our restaurants in categories, and they are what we call the celebratory casuals, celebratory wants, the quick casuals, casual friends, bars, and specialty impulse. You can see the want, and then need, because some food is want, some food is need. Eastern, because it's a want environment, discretionary spending environment, 90% of our venues are want-based. That is, there are places who leave emotional experiences. You remember maybe your first date, or you go there for your wedding, or it's a drink after work, etc. And very few of them are functional food. That is, for people who work there, they need a slice of pizza or something. And then this is kind of the way we merchandise. It's a kind of a reverse pyramid. And the white color is this GLA, means gross leasable area. So it's the square footages. And then the beige is the sales in those areas. And for example, I mean, again, that's 18, I think we have. So, I mean, these are the kind of restaurants we put in the, celebratory casual category. Then we have the celebratory, I mean, the higher end product type. I mean, today, these are the places where the average ticket would be in the $100 range per person. Then we have the quick casual need. That's something, you spend $8, $10, grab something for, just to cover. I'm sorry, I'm turning my back there. Then we have casual friends. This is another category we have. And then, bars. And bars, what's interesting in the bars, I always like to mention this, all of them sell the same things. You can get a margarita in any bar, you can get a bourbon in any bar, you can get beer anywhere and so forth, but you have to position them for the people, right? At the Cowboy Bar, for example, the customer will be different. They might even have Lone Star, you don't know the beer. But if you go to, for example, Fado's, I mean, it's going to be mostly, the Guinness, Black and Tan, and, soccer on the field, etc. When you go to Bar Louis, it used to be the martinis, I mean, it's blonde wood, etc. They have the personality, because not everyone goes to the same thing, and you try to merchandise. And then we have what you call the impulse purchases, I mean, them, the ice cream, the cookies, and stuff like that we do with this. And so the question sometimes happens is, what is the survival pattern of those, Rainforest, Hard Rock Cafe, and so forth? Because at Eastern, we tried those. And then we realized that on the left, you have things that survive very well. I mean, our Fado Irish bar is getting into that mode. We want to replace it, put some fresh windows and so forth. Then we realized that people kind of like it the way it is. The dark smells cigar, I don't know, beer, and they like it. Now, Rainforest Cafe is a concept that passed, that died. I mean, it didn't survive. Hard Rock is surviving in tourist destinations, basically. So it would be difficult, because for us, I mean, tourism represents less than 10%. And then, then is there a future for single menu takeout restaurants? I mean, we are talking about, there was a conversation. I don't know if you know what a ghost kitchen is. I mean, basically, there are people saying today, when you order Uber or something, does really the concept need to have a door? I mean, a Papa John's, I mean, it's a kitchen, so why didn't you put them in the back of a warehouse? And then, they do pizza, find a fancy Italian name. They do burgers, find a good burger name. Chicken wings, find a name. It happens in a warehouse, and all they do is deliver. But on the web page, they appear, like a real place. Have 3 kinds of burgers or 5 kinds of things and so forth. This is during COVID, particularly, everybody thought, oh, ghost kitchens, Mike, that's going to be the future. All those guys are going to die. Well, they are not dying. Yeah, it's difficult to explain why, but they are continuing, and actually they are growing right now. So, I mean, I don't have any answer to all this. I mean, I'm just sharing you some questions I have. So anyway, that was it. So you can see if there are some questions.
With what seems to be the exit of a lot of people working in downtown areas, Columbus being one of those, how do you see the downtown areas of the US since COVID surviving?
This is, I mean, this is a long, complicated conversation. But so what happens is, like at Eastern, we have almost no vacancy in our offices. So why is it? Well, because what I discovered at Eastern, when we lease offices, our rents are comparable, might be slightly higher. I mean, some of us know, maybe we are 5% higher, but it's very sticky. When an office tenant gets at Easton and rents an office, when the lease expires, they come to us and say, okay, we need an offer for extending, and then we'll get offers from the neighboring office buildings as well. We always smile because their employees will never want to go to an office building in the middle of a parking lot where they can be at Easton. So, I mean, we know what the leverage is. So what happens is downtown Columbus could be that. Nationwide is trying to do that. There's no one from Nationwide here maybe, but I mean, Nationwide, I mean, I told him the mistake they made is the way they introduced the retail into the mix. You see the streets of Nationwide, the whole area is magnificently landscaped, but it's dead because it needs parallel parking. Parallel parking is the trick. It's not for the parking. It just activates the environment. And then you get retailers in. So, but, you know, people like to work there still. I mean, even with the inconveniences, still, they prefer rather there or somewhere else. The challenge happening is, and they're Bellefontaine, I don't know if you know, that's a city in Ohio, Northwest, you know, where they organize their downtown, you know, because of one family. I mean, there's a son there I know who basically purchased, organized, and so forth. So they create an environment. So what do you need to get the downtown to come back together? I mean, if I'm oversimplifying, you need all the property owners to give all their ground floors to one common consortium and then manage it as one rather than individually. Because what happens is everybody wants a bar and a jewelry store because jewelry store is $100 rent. Nobody wants a bookstore who pays $15 rent. So at Easton, I mean, imagine if I take Barnes & Noble out and I put another jewelry store. I mean, that would be stupid. And to make that balance requires that there is one, you know, Deus ex machina who looks from the top down and balances everything. Now, everybody shares the income at the end. Same with bars and restaurants. A bar is more profitable. Margin on drinks is about 80%. On food is 70. You know, so I mean, people try to go for, you know, more bars. And then, so what happens is our high street, I predicted when Easton opened, that would be our next competition. People laughed at me at the time, but which is true now. It was coming together. But the problem they are having is like gallery hop. It's a joke now, right? How many galleries are you hopping? You know, it's a bar hopping should be now, but and that's a weakness, you see, because that used to be our art street, you know, and in Easton we're going to reverse. We are going to subsidize spaces to create art galleries and so forth, you know, to balance our merchandising mix. So that's the challenge. I mean, how to look at holistically, you know, and doing it. I mean, I don't know if that's answered your questions. But...
Thanks.
You're always moving stores around from one place or one street or one building to another. What do you find is the key benefit of doing that?
Okay, so one of the reasons malls are dying, I don't know if they're financiers here, but one of the reasons malls are dying because their ownership format, real estate investment trust, is not a good format for owning malls. That's a big comment I'm making here. So a real estate investment trust, you know, it's a tool that has been created not to double tax income coming from corporations who own real estate. So when they own apartments, industrial parks, or own even power center kind of tenants, long lease, etc., is perfect because capital expenditure are predictable. You redo the asphalt every 10 years, 20 years, etc. But in environments like Easton, who are based on you know, discretionary spending, on aspirational environments, has to build emotional connections with their customers. So for that, we need to continuously update our merchandising mix to match and merchandising today. Frankly, I don't know if it's public or it's announced or not, but we are closing Banana Republic. I mean, it's old of a concept, not enough. Polaris will never close them because they pay rent, you know, why not keep them? We replace them with Altered State, you know, which is more current merchant. I mean, so that requires continuous capital expenditures. And by the way, our capital expenditures we do internally have a return way over 25, 30%. So it's not, we're not wasting our money. But if instead of investing, replacing Banana Republic with Altered Spade, I took the money and distributed to my shareholders, then you would have Banana Republic here today, 30 years later, and we'll have them again now 10 years from now. So in order to be responsive to the customer needs, you know, we need to continuously upgrade the merchandise. So we are like an Apple stock that you don't buy for the dividends. You buy them because the value increase of the business. We are where a power center is a utility stock, like buying AEP shares. You know, you do wait for the dividends and its growth is stable and it's comfortable. So that's the difference. So our goal is always to be responsive. And frankly, the challenge I have right now, I'm 72 years old. I have some influence, not most of the influence, but ultimate decision maker. My asset manager is in his 50s and my leasing team in their 40s. The question we are asking ourselves right now, is the merchandising mix we have responsive to the customer needs? You know, I mean, am I extrapolating my preferences? You know, well, I put a cowboy bar, but you know. But I mean, so I don't know. I mean, so we are asking that question, and it's not a simple question to answer, because one comment is, Yaromir, look at what Gen Zs want, and we know what they want, by the way. So why don't you ask them what to do, for example? But the problem is, when I look at the expenditures, even the boomers that I am, you know, I mean, we still are a disposable income to goes out for ourselves or our grandchildren or our children. We control more of the money out. So even when we do children's apparel, we do children's apparel that pleases the grandmother than the mother. The mother will go buy them at Costco. At Easton, you buy the grandmother's shopping place. You see, I mean, so we are continuously adjusting that. And that's the thing. But the question, what is down? So, okay, so it's not the young versus the old. So do we look at who visits Easton? Because, you know, we follow you all. We don't know you by name, but something called Placer AI. We have a data. We can say, for example, if most people go to the movies first, then to the restaurant for the movies where, I mean, we know exactly where you are coming from because we follow everybody's phones. I mean, we buy them, I mean, that information. So we know who is coming. So we say, let's take those people, then we can identify every home where they come from. We can find their income levels and so forth, and adjust our merchandising for them. Is that a good thing? Well, we're not sure because we are wondering, are we missing customers? The missing customers, we cannot catch them with that system, you know? So who should be our customers? I mean, I'm giving you so you can understand that it's complicated. You know, I mean, it's not like a very simple do this, do that. So there's half intuition, half rationality. Frankly, one thing is guiding us. I need to stop now.
No, one more question.
Okay. One thing we are doing is essentially the capital available to the retailers. Essentially, if a retailer has money and wants to expand, then we say, okay, you know, they must have money for a reason. So come here. Anyway.
Would you talk for 2 seconds about the REAP program that you brought to Columbus to help minority persons get into commercial real estate? But I think that's something that's not enough people know about.
Yeah, we did that 10 years ago or something like that. Yes, with the International Council of Shopping Center, we organized courses over a 6-month period. People need to have I think, a degree to be able to come to the courses. And then the classes were taught by professionals. I mean, I taught merchandising. I have bankers who taught banking. Because many people, especially in the poor communities or minorities, imagine real estate being selling homes. I mean, I become a broker, that's real estate. Real estate is much more complicated than that. There is banking, there is title, there is insurance, there is, I mean, all kinds of things. So we try to expose. I mean, in retrospect, I'm not sure it was perfect, but at least it allowed African-American leaders in our community to get to meet and know and be able to be in touch with the leaders of our industry and build individual relationships. That was good. Now there are other programs that are being created. I mean, there's one underway right now to teach housing, you know, to African-American leaders. I created a company with, I was a minority owner in a minority company. We build homes. We built about 40 homes in Linden and so forth, which was kind of an eye-opening experience. You know, when you have people, I mean, gunpoint on my framers twice in a month, you know, where people say wallet and phones, you know, it's difficult. But anyway, so, I mean.
We know that you will stay after the presentation today and you have to take some questions. So we do have a